Okay. Well, it's impressive the amount of people that have registered for this second webinar. I am really, really honored and also emotional, I must say, because we have over 1,100 people that have registered for this event. It's our second event. I am really, really proud. Just waiting on 1 more minute and then we'll start. So please be patient because I see a lot of people coming in. So just a second, as I said, we have wonderful teachers from all over the world. I'm just checking on the chat just for some comments. There you go, there you go. Buonasera, I can see the Italian teachers are coming in. So allow me, I would say, to start. To Joanna and Paola, are you with me? I think it's time for us to start. We love being on time and respecting our time. So as I said before, buonasera a tutti, good evening, buenas tardes, kalispera. Welcome to you all, lovely teachers, colleagues, friends, in this beautiful community that we have and we share, to the second of 4 webinars called Energize Your Classroom. Sorry, I had to say that in that way because we really have this energy flowing in these webinars. Today's topic is dyslexia and creating an inclusive environment, and our lovely guest speaker is Joanna Paolinelli. Hi, I'll be introducing you in a second. With me together, I've got Paola Giuliani. Hello, Paola. Hi. And I'll give you a second later to say something. Let me introduce myself. I think it's fair. My name is Giuseppe Romagnoli, 100% Italian. No, obviously, because it's all about inclusiveness. So I'm also part of the global world. I'm based in Ancona, and I'm the brand ambassador of Language Cert here in Italy. And I am honored to be your moderator also today. This is my second webinar of Energize Your Classroom. The first one was with Chantal Welsh, helping our students remember, and that was a great success. Lots of teachers, and today, as I said, dyslexia and create an inclusive environment with our lovely speaker, Joanna Paolinelli. Why have we chosen Energize Your Classroom? I would think the first word, I think you must have felt the energy. Energy is what we need. I think this morning, teachers inside the classroom, you can all agree, even this morning, you need energy. We need energy to do our profession, to deliver the best lessons. It's all about doing our best. So we thought of energy as a way to give you energy because it's your event. Energy is also fuel, which we need to give the students the best lessons possible. And so for also power. Power is somehow, when you got energy, we know that you got power, but allow me to say that power also means responsibility. So we as an organization, Language Cert, Joanna, educators, everyone, we have that responsibility to share and to give our best to those students that deserve the best. I would like to share a second that everyone, I can see you writing in the chat, and I apologize. Philippines, there you go. I see Macedonia, there you go. Genova, Montenegro, Parma. Wow, it's lovely to see all these different places around Italy and around the world. So I'm really, really, really excited. I'm not going to say emotional is not fair because I am emotional, but this is beautiful. Biella, Rovereto, and so on. Bergamo. Bonsoir, Savoy, beautiful. Oh my God, Athens, Ukraine. Oh my God, I'm gonna have to get back to my opening. It's taking a lot of my energy. Well, so I spoke about energy. Energy is definitely what's needed. So this is your place, your energy. Please, as you're doing, write in the chat. Joanna and I, Paola, and the organization will be managing it. So please feel free to write, share your comments. We are curious. Classroom is the place where everything happens. We consider the classroom to be an inclusive place. We believe in this. This is why we're doing the talk. And Language Cert, allow me just a few seconds to share that we are not here just for the assessment. We believe in supporting teachers by sharing, reflecting, but also receiving your feedback. So your feedback will be very important at the end of this webinar. Please do share your comments because we know that as operators in this world, we also learn by listening to you. So sharing strategies, methodologies, and approaches. Within the language cert community, trust me, everyone, we have a huge community of knowledgeable people, not only academics, experts in every single field, from marketing to technology, etc. This is why I believe we are unique and we can offer great services to everyone. And in fact, allow me just a second to say thank you to the team that have supported us in these webinars. And I'm only going to mention a few, from the marketing to the events, to the management, to the senior management. Thank you, everyone. Alexia, Mariana, Christina, Vana, Rafaela, and many that I'm probably forgetting. Thank you so much. But I need to thank also the academic team, Paul, Sylvia, and obviously Joanna, Chantal for supporting us in everything, and Paola for the great work that you're doing here in Italy with me and our team. What are these webinars about? As I said before, it's about inclusion. It's about learning how to learn, motivation, intrinsic motivation. So I believe it's very important that we will be focusing in these topics, in these webinars, on the purpose, their autonomy, and also therefore the final result of their mastery. And this is where language cert does come in. It's about certifying their mastery and spendability for their future. Evolution. Topic of last webinar was helping students remember. Today, dyslexia. The next one will be about the English language roller coaster. So it's about evolution. It's about methodologies. It's about technology. And allow me to say, we are a very strong organization in that sense. And I believe technology is a tool to help people. And Joanna will go into depth of that to help more people access assessment and opportunities in life. Authenticity, real topics, real life situations is something that I believe is very important. This is what we can be talking about, and the global English, the global language. Now, a little bit information, and buonasera, Colorado, or USA. I know that we also have a lot of people from USA. Buon pomeriggio. It's just amazing. Over 1,100 people. A little bit of housekeeping. We will try to stick to the timing, but it was 5 o'clock, but we might go slightly over because it's a very interesting topic. The chat is open. Please feel free to write, and Joanna will manage that, and I'll support her. There is a Q&A session at the end. If you can, kindly do write in the Q&A part, so directly to me, so I can find the questions and manage that together with my colleagues. Moving on, allow me to introduce my colleague, Paola Giuliani, in this adventure that we're having together in Italy. Paola is our Business Development Manager for Italy and Malta. Over to you, Paola. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Giuseppe. Thank you. So welcome, everyone, and thank you for being with us today. I know you're extremely busy as teachers, and we're really proud that you decided to invest your time in this learning opportunity, and you will not regret it, because Joanna Paolinelli is a great teacher trainer. She's nothing less than extraordinary, and she will prove it to you. We'll see that in a few minutes. And just a few words, just to basically connect myself to what Giuseppe was saying about the values that language cert. I would say that the accessibility and inclusion are really at the core of values of ours. And we're a very young organization, but we're investing a lot in that. And I know a lot of you share the same ideas. So these webinars are also aimed at building a learning community and teaching a learning community that is basically founded on these shared values. So over to you, Joanna. I'm sorry, Giuseppe, maybe you want to add something else, and enjoy this webinar, and talk to you later. Thank you very much for being with us today.
Thank you, Paola. Yes, it is the moment where I actually introduce Joanna. Joanna, you have to be patient. I have to introduce you the way I need to introduce you. Okay. So, and finally, Joanna Paolinelli is the Director of Economic Development and Innovation at the British School Pisa Group. Her teaching combines digital technology and innovative methodologies to make the classroom a place where everyone can learn. Joanna has a master's in psychological research methods, another master's in educational psychology, and is a licensed tutor of the Italian Association of Dyslexia, AID. as Paola said, a teacher trainer, a brilliant teacher trainer, if I'm allowed to say, energetic teacher trainer, a speaker on inclusive education. She regularly collaborates with book publishers and exam boards, such as LanguageCert, on the difficulties that dyslexia can cause in language learning. Joanna divides her time between working directly with children with special needs, being a teacher trainer, and training Italian state school teachers all over Italy on teaching methodologies that could maximize the strengths of students with dyslexia. So dyslexia as a way forward. I'm going to leave it to you now, Joanna. The energy is all yours.
Thank you, and thank you for that wonderful introduction, and thank you for LanguageCert for inviting me to speak today on inclusion, which I believe is fundamental in any learning environment. So I'll start off with a little picture of myself. This is me in Croatia, okay, doing a talk on inclusion. And as you can see, I have actually broke my foot, but I managed to get myself over to Croatia to do this talk on inclusion. And I started it off by talking about an experience that I had just a few months before going to this conference. And I was at one of the biggest conferences for English language teaching called IATEFL, where someone was doing a talk on dyslexia. And they were actually talking about it as a disability. In almost every slide, you know, the word disability came up. Now, if you look at me in this picture, at that moment in my life, you know, I did have a bit of a disability in the sense that there's tools that I had, as you can see, a wheelchair, and I've got my crutches. Although they allowed me to get to Croatia and do the conference, but there were so many other things I would have liked to have done, like, for example, swimming in the Croatian Sea, which I was not able to do. And this is very different for students with dyslexia, because with the right tools, all students can reach their objectives. So I do not like to call it a disability. I prefer to call dyslexia a learning difference. And for me, an inclusive environment is this one here, okay, on the third picture, because in this picture, you know, all students have been given the same tools, are able to reach their same objectives, and their vision is clear. There are no obstacles and no barriers. So hopefully today, you know, after this webinar, I will give you some ideas on how to make your classrooms a bit more inclusive. All right, so I'm just going to go through what I'm going to be talking about today. So I'll be talking about the difficulties, but also the strengths that students with dyslexia have. Very often we hear so many things about difficulties, but it's important for me today to talk about their strengths. I'll also be looking at some inclusive strategies. Now, when I say inclusive strategies, these are strategies for all students and not just students with learning differences, and ways to improve memory, ways to improve writing and reading. And also I'll be talking about collaborative, experiential, task-based learning and total physical response, which I really do believe help to create an inclusive environment. All right, now let's just think. I'm going to ask you to write in the chat box. I'm really interested, because I mean, it's great that you've all signed up for the webinar today, and I'd like to know a little bit about your classrooms. So tell me, how many students in average do you have with dyslexia in each of your classrooms? Can you write in the chat box, please, and let me know how many you have? Okay, 2, 1, 3, or 4. 5. Oh my goodness me. Okay, yeah, 5, 4, 3. Okay, yeah. So 5 is probably the, you know, not the average is usually around 2 or 3. 5 is actually quite a lot, but I suppose that it depends on the size of your class. Yes, thank you, everybody. And another question that I have is, does your school use inclusive methodologies? Okay, or do you feel that you need more support with this? Okay, not enough. Okay, not enough. We need more support. Not enough, but this is good. This is probably why you're here. All right. Okay, so I will help you with this today. Now, I think all of you know the difficulties that students with dyslexia have, right? I mean, the first difficulty, it's called a phonological processing disorder, really. As I said, I don't like to call it a disorder, but it's the ability to hear speech sounds and then link them with a letter or symbol. And it's sometimes called decoding. But also they have difficulty actually rapidly retrieving words. So many of them, the reading may be imprecise and actually very slow. I mean, these are the basics of dyslexia. But there's something that I want to share with you. Students, very often students who have got mild forms of dyslexia, maybe mild problems in their L1 language that are maybe not even diagnosed, actually have great difficulty learning English as a second language. And we as English teachers have really got a big responsibility because very often we are the ones who notice these difficulties before teachers of any other subjects. So, I mean, if you just have a look at this slide, there are, you know, English is an orthographically deep language. And what does that mean? Well, it means that there are so many different correspondences between the letter and the phoneme. I mean, there are 26 letters and 44 sounds. And even the word phoneme, you know, logically should be spelled with an F. Okay, so that's just instead of a PH. Now, I'm going to just bring up some of the difficulties that students with dyslexia have, okay, so to give you a bigger understanding, because it's not just about reading and writing, right? So let's just keep this in mind. Very often they have difficulties with visual interference in general, right? So this is an experiment done with students with dyslexia and students without dyslexia, and it actually follows their eye movements as they read on the page. Now, this is the students without dyslexia, and the students with dyslexia, you see their eye movements go up and down and up and down. And this very often causes visual stress or visual interference, which is something that I will be addressing today. Now, if you look here, this actually shows parts of the brain, of the left side of the brain, that are activated when students read. Now, if you look here, we've got the dyslexic reader and the typical reader, and you can see that this part is not activated. Now, in general, students with dyslexia have difficulties in this part of the brain, which is related to phonological working memory and the whole decoding process. So what happens is that very often they use the slower part of the brain to read and to decode. But what is extremely interesting, and what I'll be talking about later, is that they found that students with dyslexia, when they read, there actually are parts of the right side of the brain that are activated that typical readers do not have. And that is something that I'm going to be talking about later. So now, if you think about it, if this part of the brain is not working as well, and they're using this slower route to reading, okay, then it means that it's not so automatic, okay? It's called a weakness in processing speed. But if they do have to use more conscious effort, okay, I'm going to ask you now in the chat box, what do you think could be the result of the fact that they have to compensate with more conscious effort when they have to read or when they have to do activities? What do you think? What could be some of this? Yes, they are tired. Yeah, absolutely. Tiredness, yes. Fatigue, frustration. Yes, absolutely. Well done. Yes, absolutely. Something that I noticed, yeah, you see, number one, tiredness. Something that I noticed was the headaches, because my eldest daughter, she used to come home with the really sore heads, and I was told to take her to the eye specialist, which we did. And then we discovered that she does have dyslexia, and that was her biggest problem, these headaches. She had no problems in primary school, but she put so much conscious effort into doing things that she would come home with a headache and feeling tired. And the teachers did not really want to believe that she had dyslexia because she was getting good marks. And something that I'll never forget, that our psychologist said that she was a bit like a Ferrari with a handbrake, okay? So she could not go as fast as she was supposed to go. So this is a really interesting thing that I wanted to share with you. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, well, thank you so much for participating in the chat. And then also distraction, you know, because when they do get tired, headaches, sometimes they get more easily distracted. Absolutely. But a big one is the sense of low self-esteem and self-confidence. Because if you think about it, you know, these students who are maybe haven't been diagnosed, many of my students are not diagnosed until until secondary school. So you can imagine that feeling of, you know, having to being incapable, maybe feel that they're not clever enough. So it's really important. I'm not going to, for us as teachers, to look out for the signs and to help them as much as we can. And the last difficulty that I'm going to talk about is working memory. All right. Now, working memory is something that I've always found very difficult to explain, but it's a bit like the ability to hold and manipulate information. And I like to talk about it as a toolbox. All right. So just keep that in mind. So here we have our non-dyslexic student called Philip. Now, Philip has got a very organized toolbox, right? So everything is in the right place. And he knows what tool to use and when to use it, where to find it, and how to use it in the correct sequence to reach his objective. Then we have Peter. Now, Peter has a toolbox. He has all the tools in the toolbox, but he doesn't remember how to use some of them. And sometimes he can't find the one that he wants to use because his toolbox is a bit messier than Philip's toolbox. So, for example, he may use a hammer to remove a nail. So in maths, for example, this could be the plus, using the plus instead of the minus, or in English, using the wrong auxiliary to make the present perfect, for example. All right. And also, it's not just about tools being in the toolbox, but every tool comes under a category, but some have got different subcategories. So, for example, screwdrivers, each screwdriver removes a specific type of nail. And for Philip, Peter, these subcategories are not clear. Peter may put all types of screwdrivers together under the same category. So for example, if you say to him, all right, Peter, give me a sentence in the past simple using make. So he knows that he has to put the verb into the past, but maybe he might use the ED rule instead of the irregular form, right? I hope I haven't confused you with my toolbox idea, but what our job as teachers is to help Peter organize his toolbox. We have to make all the categories clear, the labels clear, the subcategories clear. Now, this is not just for Peter, because we have many students in our classes who have not got very good working memory. I certainly did not have a good memory at school. So this helps all students, as I say, inclusive. Now, I'm going to stop talking about their difficulties now. I told you I would talk about their strengths as well. And recent research has started to take us away from the idea that dyslexia is a deficit. Now, in the past, there were so many deficit theories on dyslexia. And there are some questions that research has been asking. For example, why are 5 to 20% of the population dyslexic? Why do many dyslexics have so many strengths in discovery, invention, creativity? I mean, I've written some here. I mean, people like Steve Jobs, Einstein, Graham Bell, Steven Spielberg, Richard Branson, just to name a few, we have discovered that they have got dyslexia. And there was a study done by Atkinson in 2003 that showed that 40% of the 300 millionaires who participated in his study had been diagnosed with dyslexia. So this is interesting. And recently I watched the story of Spotify on Netflix, and it was showing the life of Martin, who is the co-founder of Spotify. And in this, one of the episodes, they were actually showing Martin, who met Peter Thiel, who was the founder of PayPal. Obviously, they were actors. And so Martin had actually, he had found out recently that he does have ADHD. And I'm going to let you listen to the little dialogue in this series, in this episode of Netflix. I'll just let you listen.
But if you ever thought you might have a condition,
What?
ADHD maybe.
Oh,
Something that everyone else thinks is a shtick, but it's almost certainly neural.
What is he talking about?
Don't worry, you're in good company. The average rate of neurodiversity in the wider population is about 5%. In the tech industry, it's about 30%.
okay. So that was just him showing these these people who have created such amazing things are also have got neurodiversity, which is quite interesting. But also not just famous people with dyslexia or learning differences, but it's also universal and cross-cultural. Now, there was a study, a recent study in 2000, and this year actually, and it stated that the differences in cognition, the underlying difficulties that could have evolved with the technology of writing and reading. And the idea is that they're saying that reading and writing is a cultural invention. And so that's, it assumes that this difficulty is related to some kind of deficit. But it's like saying someone who is not good at computer programming has a neurobiological disorder. So, technology brought us reading and writing. And what's really interesting, that there's so many people in technology that are not only have they got dyslexia, but they're bringing about ways to solve the reading and writing problems. For example, things like text to speech. I mean, that takes away the weight of reading, which is extremely, extremely interesting. And another interesting study showed that there could be a evolutionary basis for dyslexia, because Gershwin says that when a broad part of the population seems to have an adverse condition, that there may actually be an advantage to play in this. So maybe the whole idea of these big innovators having dyslexia is part of the advantage. And another study by DeCaro also showed that some people with lower working memory have actually been associated with this enhanced insight-based reasoning, divergent thinking, which is the ability to actually think about things in a different way and finding solutions. So if we go back to the toolbox, it could be the ability to use a hammer in an innovative way. And so I don't want to end with this about recent research. The idea is that the question that we must ask is not what is wrong with the dyslexic brain, but what is the dyslexic brain for? What was it built to do? Okay, and I find this really, really interesting. So to stop thinking about it as a deficit and to think about neurodiversity, the idea of different modes of intelligence. So I really wanted to talk about this because very often when you listen to talks on dyslexia, it's all about the difficulties. And I think it's time that we start to think about their strengths. All right, so we as teachers, we have got, our job as teachers is to make sure that these students reach academic success. Obviously, they have to be able to pass their exams, they have to be able to do certification. And so I'm going to look at some inclusive memory strategies, okay, which can help Peter, but not just Peter, as I said, many students. So can you think of any memory strategies that can help Peter? Okay, anyone used anything before that can increase working memory? You can write on the chat box. Okay, yes, mind maps, absolutely. Visual memory, absolutely, yes. Oh, yeah, you're very knowledgeable because, oh gosh, many of you could do this webinar. Pioneer rods, absolutely, absolutely. Thank you for your feedback. Yes, absolutely. So all of these things that you're talking about, I like to call them memory anchors. Okay, so memory anchors are a bit like boat anchors, and the fact that they stop memories from floating away. All right, so you know, I mean, the more that we use the visuals and movement, just like you've been saying, yes, rhymes, absolutely, sounds, then the more that we're using these memory anchors, all right? Now, I'm going to be looking at some of the things that you've talked about, absolutely. Now, somebody wrote mind maps. I'm going to explain to you a little bit why I don't use mind maps, but I use concept maps instead of mind maps, because I talked a little bit before about visual stress, and I find that mind maps, you know, where you've got something in the middle and all these things going out, can actually confuse students with dyslexia. So I like to use concept maps, and I'll be showing you different ways to enhance categorization, make those labels stronger in the toolbox, using color, emotions, and one of my favorite techniques, which is TPR, total physical response. All right, so let's start by my favorite activity, which is describing a photo. And you probably think, why she started with a speaking task? Well, yes, because many of you think it's just reading and writing, but actually they have difficulty in the oral part of English. So this is one of my favorite activities, where students have a picture and they have to describe what they see. Now, what do you think could be difficult about this task for a student with dyslexia? Any ideas? Because it might seem like a simple task. Too many details, don't know where to focus, vocabulary. Gosh, excellent, yes. Organize. Oh, Joe Gillespie, there you are. Yes, you've seen this before, so you probably guess. Absolutely, yes, use of different tenses, present continuous, absolutely, yes, very, very good. All right, so what type of memory anchors can we use? Right. So this is an example of a concept map. Now, what I've done is I've done the concept map from left to right, because it depends what they actually have to do. In this type of task, they've got to organize their thoughts, okay? Now, because we read from left to right, I sometimes find that it helps their memory to remember what they have to put into describing a picture, putting it from left to right. But again, it depends on the activity. So in the picture task, obviously they have to describe the people in the picture, the background, and then their appearance, how they're feeling, what they are doing, perhaps the weather, all these things, okay? So they do their concept map where they have organized their thoughts. And then in every single part of this concept maps, we need to give them the vocabulary. Laureta, absolutely. Because as we've said, it's difficult for them to go into their toolbox and get out the words that they need. So how do we do this? Well, for the younger students, you know, I do like to use these little grids. I call them grids, okay? Where this would be a grid on clothes. So when they're describing what they're wearing, okay? Or you can also do a concept map in this way. All right, now, what I do is I give them these grids or these maps for all the categories for the vocabulary that they need to do in class, but also if they're preparing for exams. For example, this is the B2 communicator, and there's a booklet available online to help teachers for all the exams. And what I do is I look at all the topics, I divide them into categories, and they all have their concept maps or their grids for the vocabulary that they need, and they keep it all in folders, either digital folders or actually for the primary students, a lot of them just have, you know, printed out schemas. So there we go. Yes, thank you, Tuba. You like concept maps. Great, great, good. I'm glad. Helps my memory as well, I must say. Also, I mean, not just for vocabulary, but also for grammar. If you look here, this is a probability concept map right now. So here we've got the different levels of probability, and I like to go up in color. Now, if you look at the girl in the picture, right, so I'm going to get you to be interactive now. All right, so I would like you to, by using one of these degrees of probability, okay, write on the chat who you think the girl in the picture is. Okay, so if you're 90% sure, you can use almost certainly. If you're 80% sure, probably. Okay, so there you go. I told you I would keep you awake. It's nice for you to interact with me. At least I know you're listening to me. Okay. Could be your daughter, could be your daughter, yes, could probably your brother. Marcella is 80% sure it's my daughter. Well done, yes. Yes, I think she must be is 100%. Yes, 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 yes. Now she's my daughter, that's daughter number 2. And she also is dyslexic. You see, it runs in the family, it comes from the husband. All right, and what is she doing? What do you think she's doing? She could be, when you see in the picture, she's at a party. Marcella, no, she's not, but she is singing, absolutely, yes, because she may be dyslexic, but she's got some voice on her, my daughter. Yeah, she was actually singing at a wedding, so there we go, yeah. But I mean, you can use these concept maps for many things, also for adverbs of frequency, you know, sometimes almost giving them the percentages. So I find this very, very useful. Yes, 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 she must be singing, excellent. Well, you see, you're great students. Also, I mean, you can use color for word. Now, somebody said Cuisinart rods before. Now, I like to use them. I like to use them to create sentences for word order. So, for example, at the beginning of the year, I will give them a list like this. And then the red will always be for nouns, and the black will always be for prepositions, and they use the Cuisinart rods to make sentences. So yes, absolutely, Cuisinart rods, yes. And also, the use of color. Now, I like to use it for emotions, but I also like to use to help memory with non-linear schemas. And you'll say, what are you talking about? Well, I mean, a lot of students have difficulty. They maybe remember things like January, February, March, but then they sort of get lost in the middle, and then they get really lost at the end because they've got to count from January to get to December, okay? So instead of getting them to learn things like this and this way in a line, I like to do things that are non-linear, okay? And they put their emotions to it. So the blue is the winter time, and the yellow is the summertime, and it's being divided into the year, the academic year. Another example is my student, how he learned the Italian alphabets, okay? So instead of going A, B, C, D, E, F, G, you know, he learned it in chunks, and he put emotions to the chunks. So the first ones are all really happy because he remembers his A, B, C, D, E, F, G. But as they go on, he needs more effort, and these O, P, Q are more complex sounds. He's given them gray, and the very suffering end, the U, V, Z, is black. And just by doing this, they can help them with the alphabet, because it may seem simple getting them to repeat the alphabet and spelling, but it's actually quite difficult for dyslexic students. Now, the last little activity for you on the memorization, okay? This is a word that I was trying to get my students to remember, and with this image. So does anyone, now anyone who's, I've used this once before, so anyone remember, does anyone have any ideas what the what the picture is? I nearly said it. I nearly said it. Now, John, yes, I said it, you see. So so what I get my students to do is you close your eyes, okay, and you imagine this kangaroo that has lost his way, and he finds himself in the North Pole, and he starts to jump, and then he manages to find a jumper, and he starts to jump, and that way they remember the jumper. Now, this can be done with lots and lots and lots of words, and I obviously get them to create their own mental images, and the funnier the image, the better they remember it. All right, so there we go. These are memorization strategies. Total physical response. Now, total physical response is something that I've used all the time throughout my career as a teacher and as a trainer, because I really do believe that it enhances deep learning and memory, okay? Because it's a whole body experience. Now, I'm going to show you a little video of an activity I did with one of my dyslexic students who is a complete beginner. He didn't know any English, he could not understand English. And I'm just going to show you this little activity that we did together, all right? Because I do like to use music in the classroom.
Okay, right.
Yeah,
okay,
maybe.
so imagine there's no heaven. It's easy if you try. No hell below us, above us, only Only sky.
I'm going to stop it there. But the idea is, you know, by using this, by using miming, he is actually understanding the words to imagine, okay? He doesn't have to produce them, but he's listening to them and he's understanding this. And I do this a lot with my children that I teach. We do a lot of songs and I just love it, you know, and I do believe, I mean, music is one of my passions. I am a musician. And I do believe that teachers, when you bring something, a passion that you have into your classroom, it really does increase motivation, which in turn increases inclusion. So I just, it's good for us to bring up our passions into the classroom. All right, and these are like the listening young learners exams. And in my classroom, I mean, I don't know if we've got a lot of primary school teachers here, but in my classrooms, I have lots of realia. And when we do the listening task, for example, this one was a listening task, and they had to listen and choose the color of the t-shirt. Well, very often, you know, I have t-shirts in the classroom and I have things, and I say, okay, and they listen, and then I get one student to choose the right t-shirt or put on the t-shirt. You know, there's lots of that. And also what I like to do is to transform listening tasks like this into speaking tasks. So for example, in this one, you can turn it into a role play and you can act out a scene at the shop. You know, can I have the t-shirt? Here it is, you know, these sort of things as well. And even in this one here with the different ways of transport, I mean, you can send some students to the front of the room, you can play the audio, you can get them to mime different ways of transport, and you can maybe mime riding a bike, and the students have to choose the right one. So these are just some examples that you can use. Using the material to prepare for an exam, there's actually a lot of activities that you can use, and it's important to get students used to the material for the exams. For example, one of my favorite things about the language cert speaking exams is that they have to do role plays, right? And this is where all their creativity comes out, because I get them to become actors. You know, they do this in a role play using different intonation. And even in the listening tasks, many listening tasks are authentic, where they've got to listen to a dialogue and then they've got to write down what the response is. And I get them to do these conversations in context and using different ways of, you know, maybe, okay, you've got an angry person, so they have to like pretend to be angry. So all these things can be done using total physical response and be really enjoyable. These are some of my students doing remote theatre. Actually, I don't know if you can see that, but it was done on Zoom, and in the background they are performing plays to students in Gaza. And this is a project that I started and then I developed with other people into an Erasmus project. And I'm talking about this today because actually this is the Erasmus project with lots and lots of plays that is actually come out now, and it's free. So it's free for anyone. You can download the plays, and there are all these teachers notes as well, and activities to do before and after. And this is a really good inclusive way, because you know you can use the props, you can act things out, and I find that, you know, excitement is one of the most important things we can bring to the classroom. Energy and acting, I think, is something that most students enjoy. All right, so we've done the memory. Let's look at some writing. Sorry, the link, I'll just go back there a second. So you're right. If you go on to remote theatre, that's the website, and there you can find everything from there. All right, so let's look at some writing strategies to help Peter. Sorry, no, actually, adults, a lot of the plays are for adults, and there is lots of plays that are actually quite strong themes like the environment, inclusiveness. So yes, yes, a lot of the plays can be used with adults. All right, so here we have some images. So very often students have got to write stories, and I like to use these are like story cubes, and you can actually use these in the classroom and create stories and image cards. Anything that's going to help them to sequence their story using images really works. And here we have got these sandwiches, I like to call them sandwich, which help them to organize their thoughts, because very often, as I say, you know, they have difficulty organizing what they want to say. So in story writing, I recommend these. You can find them on the internet. And now this is something I do talk about quite a lot. And I remember my daughter coming back from school with all this underlined mistakes and all this highlighted mistakes and all these circles in red pen. And I was thinking to myself, well, you know, if we are teaching our students to underline and to highlight important keywords, you know, when they get their homework back with all these mistakes underlined and highlighted, you know, it's actually making them remember the mistakes rather than helping them. And at the same time, it's not very good for their self-confidence. So I started during the lockdown to just, I mean, very often the students make the same mistakes in writing. So I would just choose some of the mistakes, the common mistakes, and then I would do a video where I would give them video feedback. I would perhaps highlight the correct English and leave the mistakes empty, and I would talk about it, and I would get them to think about it, and then they could correct them. But also, after what I've started to use a lot is a correction code. So what I do is, with each class, we create our own correction code. For example, preposition, verb. And so when I correct, instead of you know, underlining or scoring things out, I will put in, for example, V, and that means that they're missing a verb, or the verb is wrong, or there's something wrong with the verb, and then they can correct it themselves. Okay, it's important that we make them think about the mistakes. That's the way that they can think about it. They can correct themselves, and it does help them with their learning, absolutely. So these are the tips for writing. And of course, some tips for reading. You know, I mean, reading is, although we have text to speech and everything, it is important to give them some tips for speaking, not reading. Now, this tip I'm going to give you is for everybody, absolutely for everyone. So I always talk about top-down strategies, obviously, because it's more difficult to start with the decoding. We start with top-down. So what does that mean? You know, we look at the heading, we look at the images, the diagrams, all these things that start to form connections in our brains. And then very often we predict about what we're going to be reading about. We can discuss as a class what we know about the topic and perhaps what we'd like to learn about the topic. And sometimes I will show a video or I will play a song, anything to increase the connections and increase all these the vocabulary in their brains before we actually start to do the topic, the reading, because very often my students say to me, well, Prof, they call me Prof, and when I read, I remember the beginning and I remember the end. And then I read the questions, and then I can't remember where to find the answer in the text. I mean, that's how it is for them. So what can we do? Well, we have to build reading comprehension, right? So in any sort of reading comprehension task with questions, I would first of all get them to read the questions and highlight the keywords in the questions, right? Then they go into the paragraph and they highlight the keywords in each paragraph. And then I get them to use post-its, now either digitally or non-digitally, just normal post-its. And they write the keywords onto the post-it, okay? Or some of them, instead of writing, actually use images. And then they create this post-it map of the reading, so they don't have to reread everything again. So they can just look at the questions and they can look at their post-it and they know what their answer is. The tech version obviously is to do a Padlet, which I really am a strong believer in Padlet. But this is now I do this all the time, and it's a way of building reading comprehension, and teaching your students what keywords are helps all students with reading. And then as a post-reading task, you know, I get them to say what they learned about the topic. And then if there are things that they wanted to learn but wasn't in the reading, I say, okay, research it, learn about it. And then next week, you can present what you've learned at the next lesson. So this is like a simple task, very low tech, that you can use with your students. And for example, this is a reading part 4 in the B2 exam. And there's one more thing that I do in this specific task, is that I would get them, because I told you about the problems with visual interference, I usually get them to put a box around each paragraph in a different color, okay? That way it helps them just to know what's in each paragraph, where it stops, where it starts, and also even a line between each question, because it just helps them to do this task. And then I'll get them to obviously underline the correct, the keywords in the same color as what they've used for each paragraph. I mean, it sounds like a silly thing, but it actually helps them a lot, okay? All right. And of course, our WH words, when they underline the questions, I always give them this map so they can remember what the WH words are. You know, who, talking about a person, where, a place. And I've also added how, because very often how is in there as well as in a question. So it's nice for them to have this when they do any type of reading or listening comprehension. And increasing phonological awareness. Now, as I said, there are so many different sounds in English. And I started to work on this when one of my students, you know, he spelled the word cloud with an A. And he started to say, I'm so stupid, I'm so prof, I'm so stupid. And I said, well, you're not stupid. You actually wrote the word the way it sounds, okay? So you're not, it's English that's got its own rules for pronunciation. And even when you think there's a rule, there's so many exceptions to the rule. So I tried to make him think that it wasn't his fault. And then I said, well, what can we do? Because whenever there's a problem, I always try to work with each student and find a solution, because it's not the same for every student. I mean, some dyslexic students hate images. Well, he loved to draw, he loved images. So what he did was he put a little image underneath the sound corresponding to an Italian image. So for example, Cla is angelo in Italian, an angel, okay? Clau is unicorn, cloud, and then book unicorn. And that's what he does to help him with these difficult sounds. So this is something that we worked on together, and now many of my students actually use. And they use the images, and then after a while they don't need to use the images anymore because they remember how to spell it. All right. So let's look at some of the strengths. This is the last part of the webinar, and we're going to be looking at some of the strengths that Peter has. Now, I told you about the parts of the brain, different parts of the brain being activated when students with dyslexia read, all right? So now, students with dyslexia, a lot of them, they actually, they learn from experience, they remember from experience. And when I say experiential learning, it is that way of learning through experience or learning by doing. You've probably heard that before. And they have got this ability to, they have got doors in their brains that are opened up, and they can see things in quite amazing ways that I've noticed over the years. And it's really up to us to understand how to help them with this and how to create or how to make our lessons where, there is a bit of experiential learning going on. And also, when you use experiential learning, very often they are working with language and they're working together with other students, okay, on a specific task. Now, and this is another image. If you look at it, now this is just to show you how dyslexics deal with like problem solving, because, they are good at problem solving and seeing the big picture. So a non-dyslexic student, you give them a problem, they try to find an alternative, and then they have difficulty, and they find themselves in a bit of a difficult situation. But dyslexic students, you give them a problem, well, they can try this, they can find an alternative, and then they get it. And this is something that I think is definitely, maybe this explains some of the innovators out there, this ability to be creative thinking, to solve problems, could be absolutely the reason why. And by working on these strengths in the classroom, we're working on all the other things that they have difficulty with, self-esteem and self-confidence. All right, now, so when I talk about an inclusive learning environment, I've said it before, working on motivation, engagement, working on all these different types of learning, but also learning from peers, because we all know what Vygotsky said. He says that, that learning is the interaction between the teacher and also with experienced classmates. And he says that what children are able to achieve today with the help of others, tomorrow they will be able to carry out independently. So a lot of the activities that I use are working together with other students. And one of these examples is task-based learning. Now, task-based learning is experiential because they are actually working on a task to be performed rather than discrete language items out of context, okay? And so the context is important, extremely important, and it's communicative, and they work together, and it does encourage creative thinking and problem solving. And then what I always do when I give my students a task, I always give them a self-evaluation sheet after completing the task, okay? Because this enhances their self-awareness and also their metacognitive skills. So I always give them an evaluation sheet so they can think about what they've learned and things that they found more difficult. Any type of project work is task-based learning. So anything that I bet you do this all the time, creating a newspaper, blogs, presentations. This is there. Again, I've used Padlet. It was a project on the planets, and creating an audiobook with my students. I use this app called Book Creator, and they love it because they, you know, I put them into a group. Everyone has a different task. The people who create the graphics, people that do the audio, and there's everybody working together and using higher order thinking skills, which again is extremely important. Another, as I said before, I like to bring music into the classroom. So one of my favorite activities, and I've used this with all levels, is lyrics writing to famous songs. And so I usually do famous songs in Italian. It increases, you know, motivation, vocabulary, it practices pronunciation. So for example, we were doing the song Volare. If you've all heard of the song Volare, you probably have. And so first of all, they look at all different words that could rhyme with some of the words in the song, okay? All right. So blue, we're talking about blue. And so they found all these words, and then they started to write the song. Now, these are my adult students. I'm going to play a little some of what they created. So this is what they came up with, because the song is Volare, it's in Italian. And here we go. Let me just play, and so you can hear what they came up with. Oh, sorry. All right, I'll stop now because I'll start to sing, and we're already past the time, so I'm just going to move on. But yes, music, lyrics writing, I think is an amazing activity, and also, as I said, you can use some of the tasks in the exams to work as an inclusive technique. For example, what I like to do is I like to show them a video. This is a video of a speaking exam, all right? And I'll put my students into groups, okay? So this is, I give them the task in each group. So one group has got the task of assessing the task fulfillment and coherence of the student in the video. The other one on the accuracy and grammar. So what they do is they watch the video, they write down the mistakes, they assess the student. And this is a great way to work on exam preparation, but do it as a collaborative experience where they reflect. And very often some of the mistakes we talk about, what other language could the student have used. And as the students get more confident with this, then the actual students can try out doing the speaking part, and the other students in groups can again assess them. So this is something that I find works. And also, I talked about metacognition. I think it's really important to, give them problems and give them ways when we teach grammar, let them think about the grammar, let them think about what the rule is in the grammar. And an activity, a very simple activity, is that I give them a sample paper of a part of the exam. And they're put into groups and they have to write down the answers, but they have to justify their answers. They have to explain why the rules and why this is correct, okay? And then I give them answer sheets, and where they've actually, made mistakes, they have to think about the rules and then explain, what went wrong, what is the correct rule. And then I ask them to give me other examples of English where that rule is used. And sometimes we even create exercises or Kahoot or quizzes as an interactive game using that rule which they didn't understand. And for primary school, a little thing that I like to use is called tablotto, and this is self-correcting. So it's like it's a game where they have all these different types of cards that they put into the game, and they've got to match the card up with the correct color, all right? And then they turn it around, and if the color matches, then that means it's correct. And if it doesn't, they've got to correct themselves. And there's lots and lots of different vocabulary. And sometimes I actually get my students to create the cards for this game. This is just 2 ideas of self-correcting. And finally, Giuseppe said that I like technology. Well, another project that I've gone into, and I think really does bring a lot of excitement and energy into the classroom, is virtual reality. Now, virtual reality combines the whole learning by doing and task-based learning and TPR, because you're actually immersed in that experience. And in this little project that we did, what happens is that the students, one student puts on the VR headset, and the headset is linked up into the screen so the other students can see what's happening. And the students have got these notes to help the student with the VR set get out of an escape room. Okay, so they're stuck in this escape, and one of them is actually a space station, and they have to be able to solve the task. Every single task that is solved, they move on to the next stage. And I find this extremely motivational for students. And this is a project also, this is free. It's an app that you can download. It's called VR for LL. And it's something that we're starting to use with English language, using virtual reality. I know some of you probably think, no, we don't, it's not something that we'd like to use in our classes, but I do think that in the future, this is we're going to be using it more and more, and it could become a metacognitive tool, because at the end of the day, when you engage students in these hand-on experiences, they can remember things. It's more authentic, real world situations. And of course, as I said, you're combining TPR and even CLIL, I've been able to go into these, going into the stars and study history. And, this is just something that I wanted to share with you. And in the final webinar in this series, I will be talking more about it. All right, so I'm going to stop there because I've gone over. So just summing up my idea of the future, really, and even now, I don't think it's a future that's going to be so far off, but I believe that, we're not going to have to be talking about learning difficulties or disabilities, but just different ways of learning. And I believe that all students will be able to access tools, and perhaps technology will play an even bigger part in this, technology made by people who are neurodiverse. And the classroom, again, should not be a place where teachers teach, but where we can create that atmosphere where all students can learn. So we won't be seeing this picture anymore, okay? It will be the students, every student, thinking in their own way, and not the teacher being a teacher, but, just creating a learning environment. So that's enough for me. Thank you so much, everybody, for listening to me until now. All right.
Here I am, Joanna. Thank you.
A lot of information, but I'm very passionate about this subject, not just because I have children with dyslexia, but I do believe that, small things can make massive differences. Thank you, everyone, for your wonderful feedback. Oh, wonderful. Thank you.
There's a lot of thank yous going on at the moment, so enjoy, Joanna. Thank you so much superstar, full of energy.
Yes.
You have
I think
definitely
that you said that
energized us.
you weren't all here. I couldn't hear you, but if you'd all been present, I could actually hear you. You would all have been singing. So
Imagine all the people.
yeah.
Okay, Joanna, thank
Well,
you
I've gone
so
over a
much.
bit, but we started a bit late, so.
No, we're more or less in time. I think it's fair that we have our Q&A. There's a lot have been said. You've said so many important keywords: diversity, imagination, the power of music, that someone wrote in the chat, and I found very, very interesting. It was also mentioned in the previous webinar, and I'm sure it will be a common thing. Visualizations, colors, feelings, emotional intelligence,
Can
the
I just
strength.
say something? People are asking about font type and background color. Please, I have never met a dyslexic student that is the same, all right, ever. So just ask them. Ask them what they prefer, because there is like a special dyslexic font, but not everybody likes it. So just ask them, okay? So as I say, because it's so complex, it's not just, everyone is so different. So there isn't one way. There is never just one way. I've given you some ideas, things that I work for me in general, but ask them. Yeah, that's how I was going to answer. Anything else?
I've got some questions, Joanna, so I'll start by asking them, and you can maybe jump in, check some others. What program do you use for the maps?
You're right. I forgot. See, I went too quickly there. The one that I was using there was Mindomo. I'm going to write it in the chat. Yeah, Mindomo. You know why I like it? Because it's very not expensive, and you can share the link with them, and they can create their own map, which I think is very, very good, because there's lots of different programs, but not where it's collaborative. So I think I like the fact that Mindomo is collaborative. So there you go. All right.
I'm just going to get one question out of the way, because I had several people asking. Some people have to leave, or they've got other commitments. The people that have registered to this webinar will be getting the recording. So don't worry, you'll have a chance, for those who didn't finish, to see what Joanna said. You'll get the recording. So don't worry about that. Joanna, website. I think someone wrote it in the chat, the website for remote theatre, which is www.remotetheatre.org.
Yeah, these are all free tools. Okay, absolutely
all free tools.
Yeah.
Someone asked if you have any specific advice for individual lessons, one-to-ones. If there's anything different, major.
Yeah, I mean, you've got the advantage of really understanding what works, because obviously sometimes in a state school, teachers have got these big classes and it's difficult. The advantage is really understanding your student, and I often learn so much from them. Absolutely. I mean, whenever I do individual dialect, they learn from me, but I also learn a lot from them. So there you go. Yeah.
Learning by sharing, by giving.
Yes, absolutely.
I don't know. Paola, have you seen any other questions?
Asking about certificates. I've seen everyone's asking about.
I've seen a lot of compliments for
yes,
Joanna, and of
absolutely.
course I was never doubting that. I would like to remind everybody that we're gonna have 2 more webinars for this series. So the next one is on the 16th of November, and that's with Chantel Walsh. And then we're gonna have another one on the 7th of December, again with Joanna. I'm sure you're gonna get a reminder for these 2 webinars, so please don't miss them and spread the word. Invite your colleagues. You've seen how useful this webinar has been, and we hope we'll bring more to the learning and teaching community also in the next 2.
Right.
Yes.
Super. Claire, teaching literature again, concept maps, absolutely. I've used them all the time. I often prepare students for the last year of the Italian state school exams in literature using concept maps. Okay, absolutely. Yeah. All right. Thank you, everybody. It's lovely to be here, and I'll see you again in December.
Thank you, Joanna, for the presentation. Very, very interesting. We will see you soon, but we'll see you in December. And the next, as Paola said, webinar is on the 16th of November with the English language roller coaster with Chantel Welsh, and then Joanna on the 7th. Let me just say one thing before you leave. You will see a pop-up with a survey. Please take just 20 seconds to fill this in, because it's very important for us and for us to build a better community and a professional community. Learning by learning, as you say, by getting your feedback, as I said before. That's it. I don't have any questions, Joanna.
And Giuseppe, they're going to get the certificate. So yes, the
Yes,
answer
sorry,
is
yes, certificates, yes, that was the other thing.
Can I just
So-
share to Tuba, who wrote, "You are the correct person to present a title with the Energize Your Classroom." Thank you so much. That's going to make my day.
Well, that's something that Paul and I knew. We need energy, so Joanna's got the energy. High energy, very good.
Thank
So
you.
I'm going to close this lovely webinar. Thank you for everything. Thank you for all of you participating from all over the world. I'm not going to go through that again. Thank you, Paula. Thank you to our lovely team on the back end and for Language Cert for organizing this. Once again, see you in 2 weeks' time for the next webinar. Ciao, arrivederci, adios
Ciao,
to
thank
everyone.
you.
Bye.